Our next speaker will be Fernando Montenegro, and here he is.
Thank you. Just a second, thank you. A little too much technology here, just give me a second. So thank you very much for having me here. It's a privilege to be accepted to speak, and I really appreciate it. I may have overestimated my ability to summarize information, so I'm going to go through content relatively quickly. Is anyone familiar with the work of Robert Cialdini, social psychology? So you may understand there's a reason why every speaker, myself included, puts this stuff up front, right? And we can talk about it afterwards. But fundamentally, the about me is I'm currently an independent consultant. I've been in professional services and sales engineering for a long time. I come from a network background, and I've been degrees from '94 and what have you. And I am very curious, and that's part of the genesis for this talk as well. I have an interest in finance. I'm a do-it-yourself investor kind of thing. I have a deep interest in economics, both behavior economics as well as what's called the efficient market hypothesis. And one of these days, I'll be able to conciliate both of them in my head. And I'm also interested in data science, right? Now, this interest gives me the opportunity to look at different things and try to bring those different things to information security. And that's the genesis, or that's the theme for this particular talk. Now, the slide advanced, but anybody remember this movie? Okay. I'm not sure if it makes you feel good or bad, but in 3 weeks, it'll be 30 years. Yes. Yep. Anyway, this movie is The Untouchables, and it has a fantastic line about it, a fantastic line spoken by Sean Connery as they pursue Al Capone. And the line is, don't to a gunfight. If you look, I'm not going to spoil the movie, or I will, but fundamentally they nail Capone not for murder, not for corruption, but for tax evasion, right? So the economics of things brought down Al Capone. And it is this sense of how can we use economics, how can we use other things around security to help us achieve the security outcomes that we want. Like I said, I'm very interested in behavior economics, and it is because of behavior economics. So these are some of the popular topics on the popular books on the topic. If you have an opportunity to read, Dan Ariely is a very easy, accessible read about behavioral econ. If you have an interest in to look at it deeper, both Daniel Kahneman and Richard Thaler have good material on that as well. And it was as I pursued behavioral economics that I came across this website called Clearer Thinking, right? clearthinking.org. And it's an initiative run by an entrepreneur. His name is Spencer Greenberg. And his mission in life is helping people make better decisions. And you go on the website, they have a number of presentations on topics and whatnot. One thing he has that I really like, he has a time of use or a value of time calculator. Calculate how much is your time worth. It's not as immediate, it's not as simple a calculation as you think, but it is very illuminating. And one of the things that he has on this website, on the Clear Thinking website, is he came up with something he called the 4 Eyes framework. And his initial idea was, okay, let's take any problem in the world. Take a problem that is an existing problem, a problem that is important. Why haven't we solved that problem? Right? He spoke about this in the context of an entrepreneur trying to solve that problem. And the message is, you should look at why people failed, why people before you failed. And what he came up with is that failure is a combination of usually one of 4 things. Not just one, but one of 4. He talks about it looking at failure from 4 perspectives. Perspective number 1 is incentives. Number 2 is ignorance. I like to call it information. Number 3 is investments. And number 4 is irrationality. So failures in a particular problem end up being a combination of one of these failures. So let's take a quick look at them. Let's start with incentives. Again, I love economics. Problem with incentives is an incentive problem is when the agent or the individual or the organization doing something is not incentivized to resolve it. And it might be a positive incentive or a negative incentive. The famous example is that was having issues with package delivery. People weren't moving packages fast enough. And when they drilled down into it, they realized that the problem was that moving the packages were being paid by the shift. They weren't being paid by the workload. So what ended up happening is that the moment they shifted the pay from, we're going to pay you for this entire package, and for this workload, and if you're done with this in 2 hours, good for you, the problem solved itself. Similar examples happened with, it says here Xerox copiers, but I was in sales engineering, and it happens with sales engineering all the time, which is the notion of what happens when the incentive structure for your sales organization doesn't match what you want to achieve. Why the new product may not be selling as much as you expect. Well, maybe the new product doesn't sell because your sales force is not being compensated or is not being incentivized to sell that particular product. It's not that the product is bad, it's that your sales force is not incentivized to resolve it. And the last example is a famous one about incentives where a particular daycare in Israel was dealing with late fees or dealing with the problem of parents not picking up their kids in time. So they instituted a fine. Come in and we'll pay you. If you're late, you'll pay $1 a minute or $5 a minute or whatever it was. Well, they saw that actually the number of parents picking up their kids late overshot. Why? Because it ended up happening that the parents now had monetized that transaction and they were willing to take that money. So solving an incentive problem is not just about imposing a cost on someone. Someone may very well be willing to take that cost, right? So how do we resolve incentives? Incentives get resolved fundamentally by giving the right incentives for positive outcomes. Maybe you are doing grants, or maybe you're doing bonuses within an organization. Or it may be a negative incentive as well. Maybe you're going to have new taxation, maybe you're going to have a new fine, etc. Fundamentally, incentives is one of the problems that you can use, or one of the perspectives to use why things fail. Number two is ignorance. I prefer to say information, but ignorance is fine. And that is when the people involved in something don't know how to solve it. And it might be an individual problem, and it might be a societal problem. The famous example is that when you had sexually transmitted disease prevention campaign in Africa, and they were not getting the results they wanted. Why were they not getting the results they wanted? They went ahead and polled the target community. And the target community had this wild misconception that condoms actually carried the diseases they were trying to prevent. So it was fundamentally a knowledge problem. Now, this might not be only a problem with individuals. It might be a problem with society itself. How do we solve the problem of storing energy, clean energy? I don't know. Nobody knows, right? It's an active investigation problem, but it's still an information problem, right? And I would like to say that, to some extent, poor coding practices are an information problem. People make coding mistakes, or people may introduce security bugs, maybe because they don't know that needs to be fixed. So it's an information problem. How do you resolve information problems? Well, it's pretty obvious. You introduce that education campaign, you introduce that awareness campaign, you introduce that basic research campaign. Now, what is interesting here is that, again, it might not be just at the individual level. We keep talking about security spend and where do we save money and how much are incidents costing us. Well, if we don't know, We should gather that information. That's the data gathering part, right? Anyway, that's problem number 2. Problem number 3 is a perspective of investments. We don't have enough resources to address the problem. And again, it might be within an individual, or it might be a societal, or it might be an organizational problem. Here in this case, the problem might not just be money, it might be other types of resources. Attention is a resource that's often in demand as well. And the examples might be poverty reduction. We know that one of the ways to alleviate poverty, I mean, we have the programs, they may not have enough resources and enough funding for them. In the topic of attention, people talk about animal cruelty. I wasn't aware of this, but for every pet animal that dies, there's about 2,500 non-pet animals that die that we consume as humans. Wherever but it may not surprise you that the majority of money spent on animal cruelty goes to pet animals, not to non-pet animals. Right? Anyway, that's the example from investments. How do you resolve it? That's the easy one, right? You dedicate more resources. Perhaps it's a matter of publicity. Perhaps it's a matter of just adding headcount and so on. Which brings us, so we have a problem then. We looked at incentives, we looked at information, and we looked at investments. The last one is my favorite. It's irrationality, right? The problem is not being solved because human biases, the way that we make decisions, the way that we interact as humans is preventing us from succeeding. And people have categorized over 150 biases, cognitive biases, on a number of topics. I like to break them down into 4 major areas, if you will. As humans, in general, there is too much information for us to process effectively. For the information that we process, we're not able to extract enough meaning from that information, so we make up our own meanings, we make up our own stories. We have this tendency that we need to act fast. Our evolutionary brains are such that we respond to threats in a very peculiar way. And finally, we have difficulty remembering things. And as it says there, the examples are way too many to list. And this might be, for example, way too many to list, I'm going to list one. It was found that medical doctors were forgetting surgical instruments inside patients, right? Now, these are highly educated professionals, and they were making silly mistakes. It was not a problem of investments. It was not a problem of information. It may have been a problem of incentives if they were fine, but fundamentally it was a problem of irrationality. How do we resolve those? Well, we resolve those by, first of all, rewarding rationality, creating the processes that give the rational option perhaps as a default. There's a term in behavior economics called choice architecture, which is basically creating those secure defaults to begin with. And then, I use the example of checklists here. If you have a checklist, that removes some of those biases that we have built in. Now, I love this chart, and this is an example of all the 150 biases that we have. I actually ordered this. I'm hoping it arrives back home by the time I'm home, like a wall-sized poster of this. Now, this is not to say that behavior economics is the cure for everything. Does anybody know what this is? This is a model of the geocentric. This is a geocentric model of planet behaviors. Right, when we thought that the Earth was the center of the universe. And I can't help but see the similarities. Right? In that, once we moved to the heliocentric model, things became a lot simpler. So this is not to say that behavior economics is the be-all and end-all. There's actually an area called evolutionary economics that tries to explain some of it as well, but for our purposes here, it stands. So what did we see? We saw 4 I's. We saw incentives, we saw ignorance, we saw investments, and we saw irrationality. So let's talk about security applications for these things. Before we talk about security applications, though, I want to add a fifth I, which is importance. We talked about investments. We talk about important problems, right? So the question you should ask ourselves is, if we have all those things lined up and we're not solving the problem, perhaps the problem is not important enough. Now, this is a very famous quote by Upton Sinclair, which is, it's very difficult to get a man or a person to understand something when their salary depends on them not understanding it. And if you were here in the morning, I was clapping halfway through Wendy's presentation when she produced the numbers from Sasha Romanowski over at RAND. And that is the notion that the study that he did last year, along with others, is that fundamentally cybercrime, the way they measure it, the breaches, the way they measure them, costs about 0.4% of the annual estimated annual revenues. I'm not saying that security is not important and that we don't need to fix it. I'm saying that when we bring security issues to our IT executives, to our senior executives, we have to understand that they are evaluating that in the context of this might be a problem that even if we're off by a factor of 10, we're still a 4% problem. I would much rather deal with a 96% problem than a 4% problem any day. And unless we approach security with the right importance, but also with the right tone, we're not going to get hurt. We are the squeaky wheel that no one cares about. Yeah, ignore those guys, right? So this is my editorial line on this. There is, of course, what we do is important, but we have to frame it in the context of what our principals are expecting. So let's apply just the examples I like to do of applying this 4I framework to potential security, to potential areas in security. Are people familiar with these charts? These came from the latest Verizon data breach report, data breach investigations report, and it illustrates patch compliance or patch deployment across either multiple types of industries as well as different types of devices. So the one on the left here is user devices get patched at the way they measured it after 100 days. At approximately, they have an 83% coverage. Maybe they have a 75% coverage for servers, 68% coverage for network devices, and 44% coverage for embedded devices. Why is that? Right? Are we as an organization asking our users, we're telling them, hey, you need to go patch? And so are we making it a problem of investment in that we're not giving them the right tools to patch? Are we making it a problem of information? They don't know that they need to patch? Are we making it a problem of investments that, hey, they just don't, sorry, I mentioned investments already, that they don't have the resources? Or we're not incentivizing them enough. My point is, I don't know what your patch management process is, but I would very much like to understand how those other perspectives would fit into your problem. If you're having a problem with your patch management solution, we can see from this chart pretty much every industry does have flaws around patch management. Are you relying on information alone? Are you relying on incentives? Are you relying on investment? The fundamental point for this talk is think about those other 4 dimensions and apply them to your problems. Okay? So this is the patch management. The other one I like to talk about is software quality. Are people familiar with what's called the Kober effect? So the Kober effect refers to a scenario that happened in India in the 1700s, 1800s. Under British rule, they had a problem with too many snakes lying around. So what did the British do? They implemented a program where if you bring me a dead snake or the tail of a dead snake, you get rewarded. Can people know where this led? Well, as it happened, what people ended up doing was, hey, let's breed snakes so that we can bring the tails. Right? I'm from São Paulo. I'm from Brazil originally. I lived in São Paulo, and São Paulo had a traffic congestion program where people with a certain license plate number were only allowed to drive on certain days, right? And if they caught you with the wrong plate, you get a fine, yada yada yada. What did people do? Well, some people ended up buying a second car to have a second license plate so they could drive on the days they were not allowed with the first. Can you guess what condition the second cars were? They were much more polluting cars than the first ones. So my point is, incentives can backfire. And I mentioned this in the context of software quality, because if you're talking to your developers, please don't institute that, hey, we'll pay you on a per bug basis. You may end up paying a lot more than you expect. The other thing around incentives I find interesting is this is a chart that came from a Bug Crowd report that came out a few weeks ago, where Bug Crowd compared, now fully understanding that they have a horse in this race, but what Bug Crowd was comparing was a similar level of investment in a penetration test versus a bug bounty. And the gist of it is that if you were on a bug bounty, you are able to find a significant higher number of vulnerabilities, including critical vulnerabilities that were not found by a penetration test. Now, again, I understand that Bug Crowd has an interest in this, so it's in their interest to present the results as best as possible. But you can't help but think about the incentive structure difference between a pen test and a bug bounty. On a pen test, your pen testers are paid by the hour, or a fixed cost engagement, or what have you, whereas a bug bounty only pays out on results, if you will. Again, a perspective of how thinking about the framework, thinking about a different incentive structure might be useful. Now, last topic I want to talk about is user behavior. Are people familiar with this chart, with this cartoon? On one side, we have all the technology. On the other, we have user error. I hate this slide with a passion, because there are no human errors. There are poorly designed systems, right? We fail as an industry to accommodate the behavior of our users. And I'm sorry, that's on us. That's not on them, okay? Now, applying our framework here, we have phishing. Phishing is fundamentally a rationality problem, where if you're familiar with what's called the hot states in psychology, people are going to people are not going to think about your don't click on links security policy during that moment of excitement or fear or what have you. So please don't treat it as an information problem. It's a rationality problem. By the same token, when you give when you give people access to sensitive data and expect them to handle that data carefully, don't just hope that they're going to do it. There's a famous problem in economics called the principal agent problem, in that people will take or agents are going to do the actions on their own self-interest, independent of what the principle requires. And the solution to that is better incentives. And then this can't be a talk in 2017 without talking about ransomware. Ransomware is fundamentally a problem about insecure defaults, right? Why, in the name of all that's holy, do we allow us to execute for GPOs? Why are we not implementing better, tighter down policies for those users? We know they're going to be phished. We know they're going to suffer. Anyway, there's a fantastic talk by Michael Goff. He goes by Hacker Hurricane. I think he just delivered at B-Sides Austin on ransomware. And I think that Adrian and crew were able to, I'm not sure, I think they recorded it. But it's, so Hacker Hurricane, B-Sides Austin. So let's just wrap up. I'm coming up short on time. Looking back, we saw why things fail. We looked at different perspectives of why things might fail. Those perspectives we refer to as the 4 I's framework. framework, and we applied that framework to a couple of examples around information security. I mentioned patch management, software quality, and user behavior. I'm sure there are others. It's just a matter of us discussing them. As a refresher, this is what the 4I framework looks like. You're talking about a problem of incentives, a problem of information, a problem of investments, or a problem of irrationality. And this is the link for the website, clearthinking.org. This is me, and I'll be around for questions if we have any later. Thank you very, very, very much.